Hi again, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Okay, so the next on the agenda is the roundtable discussion. This session will be moderated by Dr. Salmah Zakaria from Academy of Sciences Malaysia and joined by 4 key water experts as our panelists. Our moderator for this session, Dr. Salmah Zakaria, is currently the chair for Academy of Sciences Malaysia Water Committee. She obtained her PhD in Deep Pit Field Water Management in Cranfield, UK in the year 1993. Her affiliation includes being a Fellow of Academy of Sciences Malaysia, a member of Institution of Engineers Malaysia, and Board of Engineers Malaysia. Her last 3 positions in governmental bodies were the Director General NAHRIM from 2005 to 2008, Director of Corporate Development Department of Irrigation and Drainage from 2002 to 2005, and Director of River Engineering Department of Irrigation and Drainage from 1999 to 2002. So with that, I invite Dr. Salmah to moderate and introduce the panelists for the session. Dr. Salmah.
Thank you, Jannah, for the introduction. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. We're now at the roundtable discussion. We will have 4 panel members. Each of them will be fielded with 2 rounds of questions. We have with us 4 panel members. The first one will be Engineer Dr. Haji Muhammad Nasir Muhammad Noor, the Director General of NAHRIM. He was previously the Director General of DID. He obtained his doctorate from University of Tottori, Japan, in River Engineering in 2002. And he has been restructuring NAHRIM since he was posted there, and converting NAHRIM from a Hydraulic Research Institute to a National Water Research Institute. Dato Dr. Nasir, the first question that we are posting to you is that climate change adaptation strategy require tools and data for predicting the climate change impact at a certain level of confidence. In this regard, NAHRIM, as a leading National Water Research Center, is mandated to assess the likely impact, in particular to water resources. Can you share how NAHRIM and other related agencies address this pertinent issue?
Thank you, Dr. Salmah. Before I proceed, I'd like to thank Dr. Salmah and fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my presentation. And I'd like to thank Dr. Salmah as well, because she's the one who put up the Climate Change Research Center at NAHRIM. We are very indebted to her. And her works, the first tools that did mention by Prof. Fredolin just now is the downscaling. This is what we have done. AR3, AR5, AR4. Apart from that, we do also do a lot of computer simulation on how hydroclimate will be in the year 2100. In terms of downscaling, this is one of the books we just published this year. Oh, I think I will see. Is the climate change, impact of climate change on the hydroclimate of Malaysia based on IPCC 5th Assessment Report, AR5. And from this model, what we did that we, like mentioned by Prof. Fredolin, we put it under a regional climate model, hydroclimate model. And from there, we split into 2, the Peninsula and Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak. And from there, we do the downscaling. From the downscaling exercise, we're able to anticipate or project what the surface temperature will be by 2050. They say in Peninsula, about minimum of 1.29 Celsius, and it go to 1.37 at the most. This is based on RCP 8.5, Representative Concession Pathway 8.5. And by the year 2100, we expect our surface temperature will go to almost 1.93 in Peninsula. And Sabah and Sarawak can go more than 2 actually, in the year 2100. And annual rainfall did mentioned by Prof. Zol, it grew 11% in Peninsula 2050 and 2100, 14%. And in Sabah is the most. It grew more than 25% by 2100. That's how one of the tools that we have. From there, we can project when there's El Nino coming. Are we going, even though we think that we have more rain, when extreme event, drought or dry spell may occur, especially when El Nino come to us. And apart from that, we did another tools, call it NHIDA, Narim Hydroclimate Data Analytical Accelerator. It's a big data analytical, BDA. Almost 10 billion data comprised of rainfall, temperature, and wind. We analyze it using supercomputer. It's 50 times faster than what we have at this moment. That system of the machine, and it come up with very fantastic result on what happened to our climate, or by the year 2100. Are we going to have another 5 years dry spell, or we are going to have a flood? And also we come up with a result like drought and temperature. We can get rainfall runoff, storm center, stream flow also can have. Climate change factor, this one the Dr. Asno did mention just now, climate change factor for design and so on. And water stress index, see? And lastly, water stress simulation. And HIDA is so strong that we can predict, they say, by 5 more years, is there going to be a dry spell in Johor? Or is it going to be another 10 years, going to be a big flood again, like 2014 in Kelantan? Things like that we can predict and forecast. And apart from NHIDA, we do also the water stress index on various river basins. And from there, we find out that Sungai Muda has the most severe water stress exploitation water river in the country, about 70%. And most is go to agriculture and water supply and industry. And apart from that, we are developing another BDA system, big data analysis, called MAIN, or Malaysian Adaptation Index. Is a vulnerability type of system and can tell whether each state in this country is ready to accept or adapt climate change. Things like water, ecosystem, public health, agriculture, forestry, infrastructure, energy. The vulnerability towards these 6 items we analyze. And the readiness, we go towards the economic side, governance side, social and environmental side. So with this, we know all the state in Malaysia, whether we are ready to accept the impact of climate change.
Thank you, Dr. Nasir. We'll go now to the next panelist, who is Professor Dato Dr. Mazlin Mokhtar. Dato Mazlin is a professor at the University Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM, and is a principal fellow at the Institute of Environment and Development, Lestari, UKM. He's currently the chairman of the Environmental Quality Council, as well as the deputy head of cluster on natural resources and environment at the National Council of Professors, a fellow of the Academy of Science Malaysia, as well as a fellow of the Institute of Chemistry Malaysia. Prof. Mazlin's expertise is in environmental analytical chemistry and environmental management, and his research interests include sustainability science and governance in sustainable development, education, and capacity building for sustainable development in terms of contributions to the country and society. Prof. Mazlin, our first question to you is social factors are pertinent to be considered in the development of climate change adaptation strategies. How would you perceive the readiness among our public confronting climate change issues? And also how do we increase the awareness and participation of people in climate change adaptation, planning and implementation? Over to you, Prof. Mazlin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Salmah. Assalamualaikum. A very good evening to friends and colleagues in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. And very good afternoon to friends and colleagues and participants coming from the UK and Europe and that region. Yeah, Dr. Salmah and to the organizers, thank you for inviting me as a panelist to share some thoughts and interact with all of you. Pertaining to how ready are the Malaysian public in terms of facing climate change, I would say partially ready, quite ready. But of course, we can be more ready. But anyway, to give a certain percentage to that figure is a bit difficult. But looking at some of the good progress and development in the country, it is very enlightening and very encouraging. In Malaysia, when we listen to Prof. Fredolin, Dr. Azno, and the earlier speakers, for Malaysians, we are more concerned or more can relate ourselves better towards the flooding event. And as Professor Zo mentioned, frequency and the intensity of the floods are more frequent and very intense and very worrying at some time. For example, yesterday evening, Malacca had a tremendous downpour and flooding everywhere. So the frequency is there, and Malaysians are exposed to all this latest knowledge and information coming from mass media and all that. In Malaysia, we are very excited. If you look at, if I can divide the perception and the understanding towards climate change coming from 4 different stakeholder groups of Malaysia, if we can do that. One is the government, second is the academia, thirdly are the business and industry people, and fourth are the community. If we've been listening from the beginning of the session this afternoon or evening, we can see very qualified expert government officers and academia who are very able in terms of bringing in good science and scientific data and information into modeling and prediction models. But the challenge is how to bring in all these complicated facts and information so that it can be understood better and to be utilized better for the particularly business and industry people and the people on the ground, common people on the ground. That is a bit of a challenge. So as you rightly mentioned, maybe the key thing that in order to enhance the preparedness of Malaysian community would be through the channels of CEPA, CEPA, the communication, education, public awareness and participation. And the other word that the Economic Planning Unit are utilizing the term AACB, which is awareness, advocacy, capacity building, and also PPP, public participatory platform. So we are trying to be better in terms of how to create greater awareness. And from that awareness, maybe advocacy can be also enhanced. And from that, we are hoping among the people who are aware and are already advocates, they can be further trained or retrained to become capacity builders, trainer. And once they got that, we really hope that they can become leadership. Relating climate change to the water sector that we are discussing this evening is very interesting. Particularly looking at the high-level policy documents in Malaysia, which had just been recently launched by the Right Honourable Prime Minister. That happened towards the end of September, the 12th Malaysia Plan. So we follow the system of many Commonwealth countries. Malaysia plan every 5 years. The 12th Malaysia Plan would cover the period 2021 to 2025, which is halfway of the SDG 2030. So we cannot run away when we discuss about climate change of how our efforts in terms of trying to achieve the aspiration of Sustainable Development Goals 2030 is also highly connected towards or with climate change phenomena. And with that, as mentioned by earlier professors in the first session, the aspect of DRR, disaster risk reduction, is also much needed for Malaysian to further understand, and from that understanding, to change our behavior and lifestyle. And that's a big challenge. If we were to try to gauge ourselves in terms of rating and ranking, in terms of SDG, Malaysia is ranked about 68 among about 150 countries in the world. But in terms of water, since we are discussing about water security of Malaysia this evening, there is one indicator of which countries are being measured in a way by certain entity.
You have about a minute, Prof. Mazlin, yeah?
Yes, yes. So IWRM implementation, if Singapore is given 100 marks, Japan 95, the latest figure for Malaysia is about 63%. So in a way, we are improving from the previous year of 2018, 42% and now 63%, which is good. So in terms of policy, beautiful policy is there, but in terms of awareness, advocacy, capacity building, we are on the right track and we can do better, certainly. And we are already having that document, and inside the 12 Malaysia plan, water sector transformation already being mentioned. And with that, Economic Planning Unit and Academic Sciences Malaysia, we are also coming up with 4 modules for the main stakeholder that I mentioned. We have high hopes. We are confident we can do it. Inshallah, we can do it together, especially with the sharing of experiences and knowledge coming from not only our region, but from other regions as well, including Europe and of course, UK. Thank you, Dr. Salmah and all. We'll meet again later.
Thank you, Prof. Mazlin. We'll go into another round afterwards. Our third speaker in the panel is Dato Engineer Abdul Kadir Muhammadin. He has 36 years of experience in the industry, water and sewage sectors. First degree from Strathclyde, Glasgow. He was a former chief executive of IWK, and he's have been serving as the president of the Malaysian Water Association in the last session. Our first question to you, Datuk Kadir, how does the climate change impact the water industry in Malaysia? And what are the strategies and actions taken to cope with the impact? Over to you, Dato.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Good morning to the other continent and good evening to Malaysians and those with the same, what I call, time zone. So thank you again to the organizers for inviting me to this session. It's very good session. I've been listening closely and all been said. And the first question posed to me has already been answered by the presenters and also some by Dr. Mazlin. So I think we can't deny this climate change will have 2 main impact. One is either you have too much water or you have too little water or no water at all. So from that on, you got to look at what's the impact of too much water. If you have too much water, then you have floods incident, coupled with these erosions that will damage a lot of things like the roads and things like that. And when talk about floods, it affect life, loss of life, and damage to the property. Erosion is the same. If you look too little water, then it creates what it creates is pollutions to the river because you do not have enough dilution factor. And then it will also impact to the agriculture industry, especially low crop productions. And if you go a bit more, there's no flow, then you will not have any energy for those hydropower that rely on the water side. So of course, in long term, it will affect our groundwater reserve that's been kept for the future generations. That much I can say. But in terms of impact to the industry, yes, great impact. Because one, I think I put the economic growth is one of the main factor that will give impact to the whole country. Of course, to the users, it's interrupted water supply. It's become a culture now in Malaysia, to some state, not all. It become a monthly event due to reason known, and also the environment degradation, sustainable environment will not be there. And of course, we talk about health, there will be spread of disease. Because in simple fact, when there's no water, it's not about drinking, it's about cleaning. So if you look at the, I give simple formula. If take example, one person requires about 200 liters per capita per day, but in actual fact, one person can only use about 5 liters. So the balance 195 is not potable water. So I give that for everyone to think. Is it necessary to have 200 liters per capita per person, or you just need 5 and the rest is non-potable water? This is one of the ways that we can saving, and we have to think in that manner in how we can conserve water. But the strategies and action to cope with the impact, this is I'm going to say a bit more. What has been said by Prof. Zul, we had to congratulate the CASA or NARIM, the National Water Research Institute of Malaysia, for having this document on climate change, adaptation framework for water sectors. It's very good document for a start. The strategy is actually to protect the water source. That is the main strategy, how you protect the water source. So, and how you contain. And that contain talk about storage, how you retain water. What been said by our KSU, I mean the Secretary General in CASA, the Ministry of Water. I agree with him. Malaysia is not water stress area. What is lacking is management of the water. Why must what being given to us, you let it flow into the sea? Second aspect is pollution control. How you control pollution? We are still not disciplined. We can. It is happening over and over again. Plant being closed simply because of river pollution. So as you can see, those who are in KL, the Klang River, the color, what the local term as Teh Tarik and Nescafe color is still there. After years, after 64 years of independence, we have tried to use this river of life, but I guess there's more to be done. Third point, I would say on the strategy is integrating all the taps. Mainly, we have 7 taps. How to protect these taps? The river, ponds, lake, reservoir, dams, another sector, groundwater. Then talk about recycled water, rainwater harvesting, been mentioned by Prof. Zul, air water generator is not being explored. And last not least, we are not that desperate, the desalination. So there's a large, ample supply of water in the sea. But that is the last scenario because cost is not there, because it's not sustainable to use desalination water. So what I'm trying to say about the taps is we go to look at the main supply. What is the standby and what is the main supply? And then how you integrate the 7 taps. So it requires good management. So let us improve that, and that is the strategy to look in overall on how we manage the source properly and how we integrate. We should break the silo. So first is the water conservation, the consumptions. That is related to, I think Dr. Hezri may talk
about 1 minute. Yeah?
Okay, water, energy, food and access. For the domestic, we got to reduce the consumption. Is for agriculture, about precision farming, NRW losses need to be reduced. Zero waste management concept must be there. Talk about maintenance infra is also important. We feel maybe there's more effort to deceive the dam, the dredging of the rivers, talk for proper SOP of the pipe litigation and safeguard the water catchment. It's very important. Breaking the silo management is another part. The strict governance, strengthening the enforcement, effective public awareness program, which Dr. Mazlin talking about, is continuous. Public satisfaction survey must be there to get the feedback from the consumers. And last not least, I would say we need a good driver. A dedicated committee can be in terms of our task force, steering committee and the like, constantly looking at risk and crisis, and also the sufficient budget allocation to look into the water sector. Otherwise, we are nowhere, because if you have a car, there's no petrol, you can't be pushing, and it will not move. Okay, so I think I can talk more in the second round. So for now, I think it's good food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Kadir. We'll just go straight away to the final panel. Dr. Hezri Adnan, who is currently the Executive Director of the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, Maya. He was previously the Chief Executive Officer of LADA, Langkawi Development Authority. He holds a PhD in Public Policy from Australian National University. He served as a member of the UN International Resource Panel, IRP, from 2015 to 2018. Dr. Hezri has consulted for international organizations such as UNDP, ASCAP, UNICEF, and ADB. With that, I'd like to pose the first question to Dr. Hezri. The question of finance is obviously a crucial factor in climate change adaptation effort. Water resources management and water supply and sanitation services lack funding and require greater attention from public and private sectors. How can we systematically integrate adaptation and mitigation planning into actual water-related projects in order to make them more attractive to investors? Over to you, Dr. Hezri.
Thank you, Dr. Salmah, for the very generous introduction. Greetings of peace and solidarity to all the audience and also fellow panelists. It's a pleasure. Thank you, organizer, for inviting the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research to be part of the conversation tonight. It is not every day that we get invited to talk on water issues, so we really appreciate this opportunity. Of course, only dollars make sense, as they always say. So a question of funding is, of course, very important in whatever endeavor, new endeavors that we would like to push forward with. In the area of water, perhaps as has been raised by fellow panelists and also the speakers before, the issue of climate financing through floods mitigation is not a strange issue in Malaysia. In fact, we have been financing, floods mitigations since before even independence in 1957, but the cost has continued to rise, and I was a bit alarmed when I heard Professor Zul mentioning that the area has actually increased over the years. Yeah, but the issue of climate financing, if you take floods as part of that, flood mitigation as part of climate action, is not new, and it has a political resonance in Malaysian society. No member of parliament or ADUN or state representative would like their area or constituency to be a flood area. So they will always look at the issue of floods and always be lobbying for this area to be covered. So there's no in terms of awareness on this, is not much of a challenge. But of course, if you look at the broader picture, from now until from 2016 to 2020 in the Asia Pacific region, we'll be needing about $200 billion a year to mitigate climate change, and about $41 billion a year to make the infrastructure resilient. And there is one estimate by CASA on the financial requirement across the water sector supply chain, from water resources to water supply, sewerage and reclamation, non-revenue water, water grid, and there's also a section on climate action, which is flood mitigation and coastal erosion. And we're looking at, from 2021 to 2040, anywhere from 200 to 330 billion ringgit will be needed in the next 20 years. And that's a big sum of money. And somebody mentioned that we are already spending 1 to sometimes 2 billion ringgit a year for flood mitigation. This is a big sum. And the government has stated that, or at least from the projection, that out of this 330 billion ringgit Malaysia for the next 20 years, at best, the government can only fork out about 100 billion. So there is a deficit of about, 200 billion that needs to come from elsewhere. And where is that going to come from? Of course, there are many opportunities from the debate or discourse or the growing interest in aligning water security with climate objective. Yeah, there's internationally there's new revenue streams that can come through carbon credits. There can be private investments to mitigate climate risk. Maybe not yet in Malaysia, but elsewhere it's already happening. And access to dedicated funds and financing facilities. Of course, what would be needed? Of course, we need the information. Climate-related hazards mapping. We need to have a detailed flood hazard map. I'm sure the Department of Irrigation and Drainage has been working on this for many years and keep on refining it. And also the digital elevation models need to be developed. So these are the sort of the basic investments that's needed, for us to do or to respond to climate action in a better way. Again, internationally, there's the response to green bond is on the rise here, and water sector can tap from such climate awareness bonds. They come in various names: sustainability awareness bonds, environmental impact bond, catastrophe bonds, resilience bonds. But the worrying part is that there is one estimate that from all these green bonds, if you like, the water sector only represents a minor share of about 9% of all the investment. Why? I think in general, especially in Malaysia, water is not visible in the economy. It's a question of pricing, and there was an attempt in 2009 to introduce the Green Technology Financing Scheme, which covers water, energy, and also waste, if I'm not mistaken, in a later building. The uptake on water technologies was very low because of the issue of pricing. But we are encouraged to know that the government is really looking to the issue of tariff. And when this is addressed, then there is a bigger space for us to respond to, we'll make it more palatable for people to respond to climate action through water.
We have about 1 minute to round up.
I think I can just summarize, Dr. Salmah, that in fact, in the area of green bond, Malaysia recently, in April, I think, launched the sustainability sukuk. So we are combining our strength in Islamic finance with the concerns on ESG. So this is amounting to about US 1.3 billion already now. It's a big sum, and this is very encouraging. Thank you.
I think for the second round, I would like to just go the other way. I'd like to call upon again Dr. Hezri to answer the second round question, which is climate adaptation should be mainstreamed into integrated river basins rather than treated as a separate activity. Successful river basin management requires an effective and impartial coordinating institution with the authority and mandate to act. To achieve this, how can policies be harmonized to avoid existing contradictions and overlaps which could constrict the coordinating body's ability to act and adapt? Dr. Hezri?
Thank you, Dr. Salmah. For such a very easy question to answer. It's a $1 million question, $6 million question rather. We have been discussing this in Malaysia for many years. What would be the ideal institutional setup to address the issue of water, be it water security or water sustainability? And because we are institutionally speaking, we are still grappling with the federal state issue, because Malaysia is a federation, and then bulk of the power on water resources, for instance, still lies with the states. And to address this, a number of innovations have been we've seen a number of innovations over the years, for instance, with the creation of water authorities at the state level, like Lembaga Urus Air Selangor, and a number of new ones have sprouted out in recent years. But I think to move forward, I think apart from having these entities, a business model need to be thought out, carefully in looking at the issue of public finance, putting more efforts into understanding that, and also looking at a fiscal measure that will benefit both the state and also the federal government. I think without understanding or without more clarity in how the fiscal, meaning the taxes, how can we ensure revenue stream from these water authorities, we will still be struggling over the years. But I think this is one question which the other panelists would like to address as well. Thank you.
Thank you. For those who are following us, Malaysia is a federated states in terms of we have both legislative laws at the state level and at the federal level. So there's a problem in terms of a seamless implementation of such a problem. Dato Kadir, your question, second round question. You were the former president of Malaysia Water Association. Obviously, you would be exposed to the industry. So how do you see the role and readiness of the water sector industrial players in these climate change adaptation strategies? Are they actively participating or just waiting, for an opportunity to participate? Over to you.
I go straight away to the role of these industrial players. Actually, the industrial players play a very big role. Because it forms up the whole stakeholders is made up of this pool. If you look at the pyramid, they are the base. They support whatever vision that government put up, and let alone the water conservation strategy and how to maximize the treated water and how to reduce the pollutions and precision use of water, and also what we call the CSR. Community program, and their involvement is required to expedite the development of water infra in all sectors. Example, reduction of NRW, talk about developing or constructing more storage areas, reducing the number of STP. I heard Dr. Hezri talk about few billions. For serious sector, you need about 30 billion for the next 30 years to put our serious infra to be at par with the developed countries. And it's a huge investment which government can't afford. It's always cheaper to build now rather than later. This is where the alternative water financing is required from private sector for them to build the water infrastructure. So the contribution is quite great. And the other sector that they can contribute is the R&D and innovation, which I believe Mission we have quite a lot, but we are not united. We have to have a proper platform. Now we have Narim. Hopefully that can be a platform to gather all the local inventions to gather around, and then how we can promote and sell to the neighboring countries. So that's the role that the industrial players can play, among others. But in terms of readiness, I'm with Professor Dr. Mazlin. I don't think so we are fully ready. This is evidence from the past and existing scenario of flood incidents, drought incidents, and the frequent water disruption, and also the pollution incidents that keep on repeating. So the lesson has been learned, but not well learned. So we, in actual fact, we have never learned. So there's a lot of room to improve, and we have to improve, may have to improve with minor improvement on the readiness. Meaning that you can see what we have done now with the formation of Friends of River. It's another improvement to get the community to be involved. But still, the community doesn't know in total holistic approach of what is water. The value of water is not appreciated, and thereby they become resistant to any slight change in the water value. So what is meant here is we must have a frequent engagement required between the industrial players, community leaders, to understand and agree on the plan with a common goal. So we cannot be sleeping on the same bed, but with different dreams. So the vision must be one, and we have to be united. So education, educating awareness program is still lacking. And this is where I think the industry is looking into this, but they will not move until there's a proper or attractive incentive to support the government adaptation to cushion the impact of the climate change. So appreciation in true value of water is still lacking. And this is where I would say that we need to promote the sustainability through zero waste management concept that will result in the waste to resource and waste to wealth. So I give one good example of RNK. It's very good effort by the government, the then MEA, Ministry of Economic Affairs, now under Economic Plan Unit. Okay, the Malaysian plan now is being developed with the engagement of the stakeholders. And I put a full recommendation to EPU and government. The continuous engagement is required to get the buy-in from the industry players to support the government efforts. And water should not be politicized. That is very important. So we need a caretaker or custodian to implement the plans to adopt the climate change and continuous improvement to accommodate the unpredictable climate change pattern and hence minimize risk of negative impact and prepare anticipated crisis. I heard about the prediction available, and in fact, you can see the impact, we can visualize the impact, but are we ready to look at the actual and real impact physically when it happens? So with the introduction of the simulation via ICT, now we're talking about AI Water 4.0, this is another way to simulate and demonstrate the effectiveness. Okay, so that's my part of it. My rounded off is this. I would like to introduce a policy. It is a sin to use potable water for non-potable usage. So especially during the drought season, and then give incentive, penalize people who use water unnecessarily. And we should promote that. And with that, I hope there must be another exercise. We have heard of fire drill, but there's no water drill. So let's think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. We go now to Prof. Mazlin. As we know, climate change is more than just causing environmental impacts. There might be climate injustice among the poor and the rich also, if they do not know, what we are talking about. At our professional level, we know what we are talking about. Outside our group, the professional group, do they understand the climate change impact adaptation? So how do you see Malaysia addressing this social justice in this battle against climate change impact?
Thank you, Dr. Salmah. That is another $1 million question. But anyway, the issue of climate injustice is not only peculiar to Malaysia, but also when we read all the literature available, it's also happening in almost all countries of the world. But anyway, coming back to the Malaysian scenario, if you look at how government and all of us, when we do the planning under the Malaysia plan, it's always there, including for the 12th Malaysia plan, Chapter 5, addressing poverty, building inclusive society, it's all there. And among the 14 game changers, game changer 2, eradicating hardcore poverty, addressing climate change, transition to the circular economy, as rightly mentioned by Datuk Kadir. So if you imagine of how climate change impacts would cause a higher degree of severity if it happened to indigenous community, marginalized community, yes, definitely. So in fact, when we have all this good data and information and predicting capability, early warning system and all that, as mentioned by Datuk Nasir and Professor Fredolin, I would like to challenge all of us to quickly translate this into some good data, as mentioned by Dr. Hezri, that can be utilized by the local leaders, particularly when we saw the good map of Dr. Azno and Professor Fredolin. They predict already what's going to happen in all the different states in Malaysia. But now, how do you bring it into a more meaningful planning, particularly to protect the poor and marginalized, because the impact will be much more severe upon them, is to know all these possible impacts at the district level. In Malaysia, 171 districts there are, 154 local authority. So I would encourage all the clever people, the researcher, the academia, the PhD student, master students. Malaysia, we have some of the top 1% good universities of the world. We need to work closer together with government, particularly bring it down to the good data so that we can plan better. And in terms of science and technology data, must be also supported by good social science and humanity data. When we read papers, even in the Katrina incidents of USA, even 10 years down the road, they are still grappling, trying to carry out research to understand how the marginalized community in the USA, in the Louisiana, being impacted, particularly on the mental health. Very difficult. Recovery of a person or group of person, particularly those who are marginalized, will take a longer time. We need to understand this. So apart from the scientific and technological experts doing research for downscaling and all that, to be suited and to be utilized by district officer and local authority, social scientists and psychology experts, you must also step up to the plate. Please do good research and inform us how to understand better the psychological state of preparedness. And when they really have, even though we know, even how prepared you are, sometimes there are surprises because uncertainty in prediction are always there. So we need to understand all these things better so that we plan better, prepare better, we can cope with it better, hopefully. And of course, in the Malaysian developing country scenario, we always look up the leadership to the government officer. So Malaysia have beautiful policies, but in terms of training, the government officer is something else. Good capacity building and training must be institutionalized. Once a government officer is already built up the capacity, please don't feel afraid. When you discharge your duty, you look and call upon the multi-helix stakeholder around you. Call the experts from the nearest university. Call the expert from the business and industry. Call the expert from the NGO leaders and all that. You are not alone. That is how perhaps we can manage better
Solve the issues.
Yeah, to solve the issue. Not easy because it's not only to Malaysia, it's everywhere in the world. And
so,
and we are happy that a lot of foundations and volunteerism coming from the youth, particularly, they are Malaysian forever willing. Whenever there's a disaster, including flood, climate change, and all that, Malaysians are always very generous to contribute either financially or in.
Right. Thank you, Prof. Mazlin. And Datuk Nasir, just appropriate that it comes to you, the last one, because we talk about looking at leaders to know what is climate change so that they can influence the people. So how have we in the government sectors, noting that you were formerly also the Director General of the ID, so we have various projects, initiatives that have been implemented as part of the climate change adaptation strategies. And you know, when there is a risk or a flood situation, it's a system or is already in place and things are sort of move forward. Yet in 2014, something went wrong. So what are the main challenges? And you think Malaysia is on track in terms of preparedness in this increasing threat of climate change? We do not know when this similar size of rainfall like the 2014 is coming in. What's your views of our state of preparedness?
Thank you again, Doctor. Okay, I did mention on NAF just now, National Adaptation Framework. There's one rest assured to Prof. Mazlin, we pass it to CASA. They are going to build up the National Adaptation Plan, like mentioned by Prof. Tajuddin just now. Okay, they are ongoing. And we have another one, they call under the NHIDA system, the SLR. Okay, sorry, the CCF, climate change factor. Before I go to that, Malaysia very lucky. Politically, we have this year the first Malaysian Climate Action Council, chaired by PM. Okay, early this year. Last week, they have the second MyCAC, same council. This is very rare to have one council convene twice a year. See? And PM chaired it, and luckily our statement, PM did put it up. That's the CCF, the climate change factor, meaning that every infrastructure system, we must incorporate, like Dr. Asno said, climate change factor. I can read here, let's say in Kedah, the 2020, the climate change factor about 5% increase. 2030, 10% increase, sorry, 10%. 40, about 15% increase. 2050, about 20% increase. By 2060, about 25% increase. That's the amount of, let's say, infrastructure work you have to increase. Even our investment, Dr. Hezri, you have to think. That's how amount of water that we have to take care of in terms of flood. And that's what during the second, the last week, my CSC. The first CSC, Malaysian Climate Action Council, we did put up one new scenario. This is sea level rise, SLR. Professor mentioned was 0.3, but recently we did study with CSIRO in Australia. We predict that sea level rise is going to go until 0.74 meter by 2100, almost double. That's what the professor said was 0.3. Due to that reason, and another phenomenon happened early this year in Terengganu. Remember, there's quite a big storm surge at the Kuala Rose area, Kuala Terengganu. Our recorded level about 4.5 meter, but early, I think end of January this year, the sea splash spilled over about 5.7, mean 1.2 meter higher than recorded. Okay, now we have extra 1.2 meter already, and plus the sea level rise about 0.7 is going to be 2 meter. So my hunch, at least 3 meter, our coastal band we got to reach to 5 meter. My KSU did mention last week, Singapore going for 5 meter, you know, 5 meter. So I did mention to him the minimum we have to go maybe 3 meter height to safeguard all our livelihood around this lovely nation. And how much it costs? That's why you have to calculate. That's the issue now. By 2100, we have to live maybe like Holland. I don't know. Maybe different. Maybe we retreat to the higher ground. So they are under adaptation. There are two things we brought up: CCF, climate change factor, and storm surge. And under the MyCSC also for mitigation, I think last week PM did mention, and then KSU also going to bring it up to COP26. Is the long-term low emission development strategy. And this one we are going to, the CASA are going to bring it up by the end of 2022. So it's interrelated to the 40% GHG reduction based on our current GDP. Okay, for 45% GHG reduction. So that's two things: the long-term low emission development strategy and the 45% interrelated. And another one related to net zero carbon to start as early as 2050. Net zero carbon. That's what we've been promised by PM, and Dato is going to bring to Glasgow, I think, next month. And one good thing, I think, the domestic emission trading scheme, that's the ETS, is being handled by the stock market, the Bursa Saham. So I think MIER should think about it, because it's carbon trading locally, and maybe investment coming. And last one, CASA going to establish the GHG Center for National GHG Center. So any offsetting, anything on the involvement of carbon emission and so on will be calculated there. So in trading also we calculated there. So they know how much trees have to plant to offset here and there.
Can you round up apa, Dato?
Okay. For final one, for AR6 just came in under the physical side, but still we're waiting for the engineering side. When it's arrived, we start to go for downscaling. So we can go for projection for both sea level rise and hydroclimate as well. So hopefully pray for us and we can start moving on from now on. And hopefully all our policy being fully taken by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. There's one question that is very interesting for any of the panelists. How far is the intervention from the politician to contribute to the effectiveness or otherwise of the climate change adaptation? Does the politician factor into how we are managing our flood, our adaptation, or is it that they are also unaware of how to handle this thing? Prof. Mazlin, to you first.
Yeah, thank you. I think they are very aware. If you look at the Malaysian Parliament, 222 of them, they has just formed the APPGM, All Party Parliamentarian Group Malaysia on Sustainable Development. And to show their commitment, they set up a special secretariat headed by Dato Dr. Denison Jayasuriya. So in a way, yes, parliamentarian, they know about all the current phenomena of climate change, the mitigation and adaptation that they need to do. But maybe we as citizens of Malaysia, we need to utilize this platform, All Party Parliamentarian Group, to get to the nearest member of parliament in our constituency. And there had been suggestion in some discussion that, hey, maybe we give each one of our 222 parliamentarian a scorecard. They must take care of the water resource, water pollution issue, and now the climate change, because you cannot run away. Water security and climate change and the nexus of water, food, energy that Hezri is looking at. Yeah, very complicated, very complex, but let's begin with the top political.
We want them to be more aware and if possible, cross the divide between the government, the politician and the opposition, because this is environment and it doesn't care. The floods, when it comes, it doesn't care whether you're in the government or in the opposition. I like to field this question to Datuk Nasir from Ajay Bay. Water security and the climate change will need to deal with both disasters due to extremes and longer-term changes. In the Malaysian context, what could be a relevant way to manage the balance between short-term problems like floods, especially urban floods, and long-term resilience of water systems? Dato Nasir?
Thank you. I did mention the CCA factor, the climate change factor. That's one way Malaysia do it, because we project from our climate, what our hydroclimate will be. From there we can forecast, not forecast project. Our development also based on that. Even the ID using, when I presented to CASA one of the meetings, we try to push it for the next Malaysian Water Council, because we know that the state government had followed it. The next is, let's say, JKR, anybody, the local government, and another that we worried is not the climate change factor where they follow now, because it's become policy. Okay, everybody have to follow it. The problem is our water resource, because we know when evaporation is very high. Dr. Zol, I think Prof. Zol mentioned this a lot. It's a lot of water we lose. We lost to evaporate. And any system that we put like dams or taps or I would say ORS of river storage, any lakes to store water can evaporate very easy, and we can have a very dry season. And that's why we suspect that easily can go to 50% minus when there's drought coming, El Nino and so on. That's why in Nahri we try to think about how to store water underground, using aquifer.
Dato' Kadir, this question from the private sector side, and then Dr. Hezri from the financial side, the same question. Dato' Kadir, from the private sector side, I'm very interested to know how we can bring in the private sectors into this, floods and long-term resilience of water systems.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the private sector, there are two things here. One is, of course, I put the dollars and cents as a priority. There are a lot of funds available already, but the terms must be right. So that it's a win-win situation for them to help. We put very tight condition to what is available, and there will be little return. They will be discouraging them to invest. So out there, quite a lot. In terms of the other side, is participation on the ground. This is where bit and pieces coming in, like Friends of River and other things. I believe that can be enhanced. I've seen Prof. Dr. Mazlin efforts and advocacy. He has made contact with community leaders of some price. They have a very good feedback, but what is lacking? The understanding of the water business. So we need to have a proper engagement, a proper forum for those interested, and what is transparent is what is available for them. I believe if we have that proper forum to be formed and establish this engagement, I strongly believe that we have funds available, be it from internal or outside. There are a lot of funds available.
In other words, the projects that we are having in mind should be sustainable by itself, yeah?
Yes, agreed. So, but under the term that is what we call mutually agreed. Cannot be one-sided.
Mutually agreed terms.
Yes.
And awareness for public sector to participate. Over to you, Dr. Hezri, on the finance side, since you are now heading Maya.
Thank you, Dr. Salmah. I left, just as personal trivia, I left the scene, the sustainable development domain for about slightly more than 2 years. And I'm very surprised, I must say, with the level of enthusiasm, level of energy in this domain. In the past 2 years, there have been, the commitments by the private sector, commitments by government have been raised by leaps and bounds. I'm very, very encouraged by the new development. And similarly, the market is expanding for many of these, because the climate change is not just a threat multiplier, but it is also, a market multiplier as well. It is sort of bringing all the other environmental concerns under the umbrella of sustainable development, but as with climate change as sort of the push factor. Yeah. So there are a lot more interest from the private sector now, and it is so common to find people who claim themselves to be an expert on environment expert or energy expert or sustainable, more than, it took them just the past 2 years. Yeah. And then for the private sector to come in, I think it's easier now than before. What needs to happen is to create a platform like Dato Kadir mentioned, but also innovation hub, because some of the solutions, technological solutions that need to come in are not out in the market yet, or at least they're not at commercial scales yet. So we need to groom these technologies, and they need to serve the local needs. So this is one way forward, I think, to create this platform where the private sector can interact with the problems here in Malaysia.
Thank you, Dr. Hezri. Thank you all the panelists for a very interesting discussion this evening. I'd like to hand over to the chair lady, Jannah.
Thank you very much to Dr. Salmah and everyone. I believe it was such a fruitful and engaging session. It's almost the end, but before we end our webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Cindy, our core researcher fellow and one of our ECN for Malaysia collaborators, to give a vote of thanks. Over to you, Cindy.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I hope you enjoyed this webinar and had a great time. It is such an honor for me to have this opportunity to thank all the dignitaries of this webinar. On behalf of Malaysia Collaboratory, under the Water Security and Sustainable Development Hub, I would like to express our gratitude to all esteemed speakers and panelists of this webinar for your participations and sharing with us your valuable inputs, experience, and knowledge here today. I extend our gratitude towards the session chair and the moderator of the 2 sessions for your exemplary performance. Thank you for your contribution in this webinar. We are also grateful towards Professor Richard, Principal Investigators of our Water Security Hub, Professor Asmi and Dr. Makala, Co-Principal Investigators of Malaysia Collaboratory, for your tremendous support towards this webinar. And of course, we'd like to express our utmost appreciation and a huge thank you to Professor Zulkifli Yusuf for initiate, plan, and organize this webinar, creating a platform for us to have conversations and discussions about climate change and water security in Malaysia. What a great event indeed. Last but not least, our technical support teams, colleagues, researchers, investigators from our early career networks of Malaysia Collaboratory and Water Security Hub, together with all participants and audience here with us today. Thank you for the perfect support that this webinar received. Wrapping this up, everyone here today plays an important role in making this webinar such a great success. Thank you so much again for your time and enjoy the rest of your day and or evening.